On today's episode, we're looking at a new beta neural filter found in Photoshop. It's the depth blur filter. We can take an image like this and turn it into this pretty simply, pretty easily. Let me show you how. Stay tuned. Hello everyone and welcome to the Joy of Editing with Dave Kelly. I'm really excited about this tutorial today because I love to blur my backgrounds and foregrounds in Photoshop to give me that really nice shallow depth of field. Now you've seen me use Topaz Mask AI if you watch my tutorials, and you know how I love it. It does a great job. Now this beta filter, the depth blur filter, again it's beta, so it's not 100% perfect yet, but it's going to get better. My go-to for blurring backgrounds is still Mask AI, but this does a really good job. If it's a simple and easy job, this will get the job done really quick. So let me show you how it works. I have 3 example images that I'll be working with today. These are stock images that you can download. Just go in the description below and you can download these images and follow along with me. So I have this one, and this one. So this will give you a good idea how this depth blur filter works. And again, bear in mind, it still is in beta. Also, please leave comments and questions in the comment section below. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this new filter. Let's get started. Now, just come up here to Filter, and your Neural Filters live right here. Click on that, and we'll launch Neural Filters. And the beta filters are right here. I showed you the other day if you watched my video, Colorize. Really cool. If you haven't seen that video, I'll link it at the end of this video. You can go and watch it. Let's go to depth blur. Just give this toggle a click and it will start to process the image in the cloud. See this little icon here, the little blue spinning wheel? It's processing this image. Let me go ahead and make this a little bit smaller so we can see the entire image. Now this image already had a nice shallow depth of field to it, but I thought I could add to it and make it look even nicer. So if you click this toggle here, you can see here's the before. And you can see the background has, it's nice and soft, but now when I show you the after, it's a little more softer. And we also have a little bit extra foreground blur here. So this not only works with the backgrounds, it'll work with the foregrounds as well. Let's take a look at the sliders here. Now we have blur strength. The default is 75. So if I drag this all the way to the right, you see the little blue wheel spinning. It's going to increase the blur amount. Here's the before and the after. So it's getting really cool. I like the front foreground blur here, but I'm missing some of the owl right here in this area right here. So I'm going to use a little tool here, and notice right here where the preview is, it says click to edit focal point. Now this part of the owl right in here, I want this to be sharp. So I'm going to put a little, I'm going to click the target tool right here and then watch what happens after it's finished processing. It'll bring those feathers back into focus. You see that? It's really cool. So it actually picks that as the focal point. Now this focal range, and I wrote some notes down here, but think of the focal range as depth of field, like on your camera, how much depth of field, how much area will be in focus. So if you drag it to the right, you're going to get more of area in focus. If you move it to the left, it'll become more shallow. In other words, let me move it the whole way to the right. We'll let it reprocess and you'll see what it's doing here. Okay, so let's a little more area in focus here. Okay, so these flowers came into focus. Now watch when I pull it back. I'm going to pull it a good way back. And watch these flowers up in here. They'll start to get blurry. See that? So that's cool, right? So in this particular image, I want a really shallow depth of field. So I think I'm going to keep it right around in here. Now you'll notice that my bird's feathers are still in focus. It's processing. Now it's done. But now notice now this is out of focus. These flowers are out of focus. Foreground flowers are in focus, and this is my focal point right here, and so my bird's feather is in focus. But now notice something here. The bird's face is a little softer, so what I need to do is take this focal range and just massage it to the right a little bit, let it process in the cloud. Again, it takes a second or two. But see that now his face is in focus, or her face. I don't know if that's a he or a she, male or female, but there you go. It's just that simple. Now let's take a look. Here's the before, and here's the after. Very nice results, kind of what a very expensive shallow depth of field lens would give you. Before I output this back to Photoshop, we have a couple other sliders to look at here. We can add haze to the out of focus areas if we click this on and drag this haze slider to the right here. Give it a second to render. And we can add some haze back there, which is kind of cool. So you have that. I can uncheck this. We can add either warmth to the out of focus areas, or we can add coolness if we move this warmth to the left. Give it a second or two. So we can do that kind of a thing, which is nice. And you can get really creative with these sliders. And we could brighten the image. Now this will brighten the entire image, I believe. Yeah, that brightens the entire image, so I don't want to do that. Or we can darken it if we move this to the left. We can add overall saturation to our image here. And let me bump this to the right. We'll add some overall saturation. Or we could remove saturation if we move it to the left. So we get a lot of extra sliders in here so we can really work with this image, which is kind of cool. And we can also output this as a depth map. I'm not going to show you that now, but the depth map is really cool, and that's what it's using to determine which part of this image will be in focus and which part will be out of focus. I'll save that for another tutorial. This would get way too long. And now all we need to do is determine how we want to output this. Now we have different choices here. I'm going to either use current layer or new layer. You can do smart filters and different things here. But today I'm just going to do a new layer and click OK, and that'll send us back into Photoshop. And so we can see here, here's our before and here's our after. Now if we just take a look at the image by itself here, let me Option or Alt click this eye right here. That's what the image looks like, okay? So it's using its artificial intelligence to determine how to blur this background, and that's what it looks like. But when you combine it with the image underneath, the two will blend together and we end up with this. Now, if we want to send this into other plugins to do further editing like Luminar or Topaz Studio 2, we need to pull this all together in a stamp layer. And I'm just going to use my Shift, Option, Command, or Alt E to do that. Now we can send this image anywhere we want. But that's important. Don't forget that step. Let's go ahead and move on to our next image. I like this image of these girls here, but I like to take these flowers out of focus. I think it'll add some interest here. So let's call on the neural filter. To do that, we'll launch it, and you'll notice it puts a blue box around her face because it thinks I have a portrait here, and it chooses Smart Portrait in the beta, but I don't want to use Smart Portrait. I'll show you that to you another time. So we're going to go right here to Depth Blur. Let's toggle it on and see what it does for this image. So that's looking pretty good. Here's the before and here's the after. Moving in the right direction. Now, I'm looking in this girl's nose. She's a little bit out of focus. Now, I could use this click to edit focal point here, but I'm not this time. I'm just going to use this focal distance slider. I didn't show you this last time, but I'll show you how cool this is. If I move this to the right, I'll show you the wrong way first. I'm moving it to the right and watch what happens. It's going to pick a different focal distance because I'm telling it I want it to go more into the background. But if I take it to the left, check this out. Now remember, it started out right here at 25. Let me just put it back to 25 so you can see. This is where it started out at. But watch when I start to drag this to the left. Now watch her nose here as I do that. I'm going to drag it way into around a 6. Give it a second or two to render out. Watch her nose, it clears up. But look how nicely the other flowers in the background go out of focus in some of the areas back in here. And that looks really awesome. So here's the before and here's the after. But how cool is that? We went from a kind of a mediocre image to something that looks like I used a very expensive shallow depth of field lens on. Pretty cool stuff. And of course, I showed you all the other sliders. And in my case, I'm done. So I'm going to put this on a new layer. I'm just going to click OK, and that sends us right back into Photoshop. And that's our second example. So here's the before, and here's the after. Now remember, I'm going to pull all this together in a stamp layer. Shift, Option, Command, or Control E, and that stamps it together so I can do further editing on this if I would like to. Now let's move on to the last image. This one will be slightly challenging because there's some grain in the background, right? So I'm not going to remove the grain. I could use like Topaz Denoise AI to remove the grain, but I kind of like the grain. It gives it an edgy look. It's in a record shop, and hey, record shops are cool places to be, and grain is cool, so let's use the grain. Okay, so let's go ahead and launch the neural filter, and I'll show you how I tackle the grain issue. Because what's going to happen, the neural filter, when it blurs the background out, it will remove the grain. Again, it sees it as a face and it chooses Smart Portrait. I don't want that now. I'm going to go to Depth Blur. We'll let it render out and see what it does. Right out of the gate, it does a nice job blurring the background, but let's go ahead and zoom into the image, and you'll notice here, see the grain on our model here, but we've lost the grain because of the blur in the background, right? So let me show you how I remedy that. First off, let's go ahead and set up the depth of field the way we want it to be. If we wanted to just have the girl in focus, we could take the focal distance slider and move it to the right and watch what happens. The record here of Elvis the King would go out of focus, but you know what? We may be shooting this image for a record company, and let's pretend we're back in time when Elvis was still alive. Wouldn't that be great? And we want to show Elvis. So this is cool with just the girl in focus and some of the records back here in focus. Kind of cool. But what if we wanted just Elvis to be in focus? We could take this focal distance and we can move it to the left way in. Let's put it around at 9 and see what happens. Now watch, after it renders out here, Elvis comes in focus, the girl goes out of focus, and that's kind of cool, right? But what if we want them both in focus? Then I think we can put it back to the default of 25, and I think we'll achieve what we want. Again, we still have an issue with that background being out of focus. We don't see any green, but I'll show you how we'll fix that in Photoshop. We're going to go ahead and output this image as a new layer again. Click OK. That'll bring us right back into Photoshop. And let's fix our grain issue. And we're back in Photoshop. So here's our before and here's our after. Pretty cool stuff. But let's go ahead and zoom in. And we don't have any grain back there, right? So here's what we're going to do. We're not going to stamp the layer this time, but we're going to be on the layer that we sent into the neural filter. Let's come up to filter. And this time we're going to go to noise. Add noise, and what we will do is add some noise in here. Now we have two different types of noise we can use. We can use uniform noise or Gaussian noise, and it can be monochromatic noise or color noise. If you check that off, you'll have color noise. I always like to just use monochromatic noise. We have a choice here of the uniform again and the Gaussian, so see which one looks the best. I think the uniform is matching pretty well on this one. I usually try them both. Sometimes I use Gaussian, sometimes I use uniform. And then we can give it more noise if we think we need more noise, or less if we need less. And I think right around there is pretty natural looking. So I'm going to click OK. And now we have noise in the background. So if we zoom in, let me zoom way in here. See that noise in the background? We've matched it. And now we have a realistic image. So if you have a grainy image and you want to blur the background, it's very important that you add noise, because if you don't add that noise in there, it's going to look very unrealistic. Somebody's going to know that something is definitely wrong. One last time, let's look at the before and after. So here's the before, a cool image, but after we add a little bit of depth blur to it, our attention is drawn more to the girl and more to Elvis the King, and he needs to be out there front and center. Very cool, this neural filter, this depth blur filter. It's in beta right now, so it can only improve. Give it a try, give it a test spin, and let me know what you think in the comments section below. I'd love to hear from you. If you're not yet a subscriber to my channel, please subscribe and click that bell notification icon. This way, every time I upload a new tutorial, you'll be notified about it. Please like and share my video. Also, it helps my channel to grow, and I really appreciate it when you do that. I want to thank each and every one of you for joining me today in The Joy of Editing with Dave Kelly, and I'll see you all right here next time. But until then, as always, happy editing.